Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose. Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here. Got a great show for you today, and you're so lucky to get this program because you don't get this stuff anyplace else. And you know what? Last couple days I've been covering a story called the Medjugorje Deception, and I went back to an interview I did with Phil Kronzer on my show back in 2006. And I'm going to start playing it again today because it's really an important story. And I wanted to also mention that I got a few emails on this story, and one person goes, Greg, why are you even talking about this with all that's going on in America now? And with all the problems we have on the border, with everything going on in Washington, no one's even going to listen. And I thought about it, and I said, he's probably right. Most people are captivated by all this propaganda coming out of Washington. I can agree with that. But then I started thinking, why am I doing this story? Because one, it shows you the true nature of the Vatican Jesuit order and the people, I believe, who are moving the New World Order, this one world control system, onto everybody in the world. And they have been probably involved in more wars, more deception than any other criminal organization in the world. And then I said, well, the reason, if people start realizing what they really do behind the scenes, then they'll understand they're not a religious organization. They're a satanic bunch that love to deceive you in every possible way. And they work together with their minions in Washington, D.C., Russia, Beijing, you name it. And together, they have played a hoax on the whole world. And that's what we talk about here. We go one step farther than thinking that nations fight each other. All they do. But there's more to it. There's more behind the scenes. And this Medjugorje deception, through the eyes of Philip Kronzer, who lost his wife to this hoax and outed Jesuit bishops and priests and others for this huge hoax, is a good way to really look at it. It really hits home because he was a very wealthy Catholic businessman. They don't care. And a millionaire businessman from Silicon Valley, manufacturing, not in computers. But anyway, it's a great story to really understand this. It's not a good story from the aspect of Phil. So that was years ago. As I covered the story during those years, just to cut to the chase, Phil was charged with a number of crimes that he didn't commit. He had to leave the country, and the last I talked to him through his attorney, he was living somewhere in an island somewhere, fearing for his life. So really, they wanted to kill him for exposing this deception. Now, during the first part of the interview, which I'm going to continue today, he mentioned a man that he worked with by the name of E. Michael Jones. And he's a PhD, and he wrote a book called The Medjugorje Deception, which really breaks the conspiracy of silence that has surrounded one of the biggest hoaxes of our times. This Medjugorje Deception tells the full truth. This is Michael Jones's book called The Medjugorje Deception. Get it? It tells the full truth from the beginning to the end, from the bloody atrocities during World War II on the other side of the Apparition Hill, to their bloody sequel in the ethnic cleansing of Mostar's Muslims with money raised by Medjugorje groups. The Medjugorje Deception is more than a book. It's a spiritual work of mercy, he says. So go look that up. You can get it on Amazon, I believe, for $19.95. Well worth it, The Medjugorje Deception. Also go back to some of my old programs. Just Google Phil Kronzer, and it's Kronzer. Where Phil is today, I don't know if he's still alive. He was up in years when I met him. But I'm going to try to track that down as we move forward with this story. One interesting thing off of Michael E. Jones, there's a little website called Culture Wars. He said this. He said that Phil Kranzer, the wealthy California businessman, had lost his wife to Medjugorje. We got into that during the show, the interviews, right? Around the time that another person named Jeff Lopez lost his wife. And remember, they were talking about Teresa Lopez, who was working with Nilica, Bishop Nilica, when she came back from Medjugorje and started to say she had all these apparitions and started to draw thousands of people to Denver, Colorado, to a Cabrini shrine. And they were doing the same hoax there. So these two people, they just represented two in a long chain of fraud and deceit that began on this Bosnia hillside in 1981. And the breakup of these marriages was just one more bad thing that happened to the world since the Queen of Peace arrived in Yugoslavia in 1981. Nothing good has happened. Proponents of the apparition like to talk about the fruits of this Mother Mary apparition. All right, says Michael E. Jones, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fruits, the broken families, the pregnant nuns, the poor people bilked out of their money, the division in the church, the de facto schism, the worst fighting in Europe since World War II, and the ethnic cleansing of Muslims from Gradno, just 5 kilometers from Medjugorje. All of it followed from those children on that hill in Bosnia in June of 1981. And isn't it interesting? They use the same MO, don't they, that they did in Fatima. You know, these little children supposedly had seen the Mother Mary, and they return all the time. You know, and basically, what happened to Michael G. Jones? When he got back to his room one day in Reno, he was giving a speech. He got a call from a man in England telling him that if he went back to Medjugorje, the Franciscans were going to have him killed. So add death threats to the list of all these fruits. And let me tell you something. What they did to Phil Kranzer is like killing him. First of all, they got all his money. Secondly, they charged him with phony crimes, that he had to flee the country because they knew if he went into any kind of jail cell, he'd never get out. And 3, the last I heard, Phil was a broken man. So the real story here is, if I said that Mother Mary is a hoax, and this is all a scam, a lot of people aren't going to believe it. And they're going to be going, no, this can't be done. There's so much propaganda out of Rome, it's incredible. And so, but ask yourself this, those of you who have a hard time swallowing this story, why did they go to such extent, of trying to kill people over this, if they're not hiding something? I mean, this is ridiculous, and you know it. Always the cover-ups got to be worse than the crime if you're really going to believe that Mother Mary appeared. Ask yourself, what kind of religious organization would do such a thing? Would bilk people out of money? And to make it even worse, so we got, this started in 1981, right? And so we should know that this is a fraud. They always used that, the poor children like they used in Fatima, right? To see the Mother Mary. We're going to talk about Fatima a little bit today as well. But you would think that the Vatican would put a stop to it, right? Well, what they've said is they have not authorized this as a real Mother Mary sighting. Oh, really? But they've authorized Fatima, and that's a hoax. So, I mean, they play this game. But if you think that they've changed with this Jesuit Pope Francis, guess what he just did in May of this year? Pope gives his Medjugorje apparitions tour his blessing. Pope Francis, in May 15th, 2019, has authorized pilgrimages to Medjugorje, which means such trips can now be officially organized by Catholic dioceses and parishes worldwide. It's an incredible deal, right? So they don't care. They know this is a hoax. They know people get destroyed from this, and they make a lot of money. At a Vatican press conference recently, Director of the Holy See, Alessandro Jesuit, emphasized that authorization by Pope Francis should not be interpreted as authentication. We still require examination by the Church. Examination of what? I can tell you what it is. It's a hoax, whether you authorize it or not. But that's okay. You guys make money off it right now. So this hoax is still going on, strong, right? Despite people like Phil Kronzer, despite people like E. Michael Jones. And of the six, listen to this, of the six visionaries, right, of Medjugorje, three of them apparently still assure us that they still have a daily apparition of the Queen of Peace, always at the same time in the afternoon, and wherever they are. Well, a fourth visionary says that she receives an apparition every month on the 2nd. Oh, I guess the Mother Mary comes down on the 2nd of every month. While for the last two, this happens once a year. Wow. And then there's that Teresa Lopez. She said she sees the Mother Mary, and then brought her fake visions over to Cabrini Shrine in Denver to collect money. And, people give him money. Ask Phil Kronzer. Listen, Phil started on this because his wife was a devout Catholic. He was a devout Catholic. And they used to go to all these as a vacation, because he had a lot of money. Phil did well. They used to go to all the Mother Mary sites, and Phil would donate a lot of money. That's how he got on the radar of crooks like Bishop Nilitsa, who I don't think is alive anymore. But anyway, it still goes on with the Jesuits. We got the Pope, Jesuit Pope now saying, okay, we're going to authorize these pilgrimages to Medjugorje. And so you see what really is happening here. Now, just to add some things before we I'm going to play in the second half hour more of that Phil Kronzer interview I did in 2006. But years ago we looked into, one of the reasons I really like looking into this stuff is I grew up believing it. And how many other people grow up believing this garbage? And then when you say that you don't believe it based on facts that make it sound like, hey, what the hell are they doing? I mean, when you talk to people like Kronzer and you do some really research behind the scenes, you start going, hey, this could be a fake, or it should be. It is a fake. And then you're considered a heretic. Then you're considered crazy. And if you really start writing books like E. Michael Jones, you get your life threatened. Or if you hire private investigators and create a foundation like Kronzer did to get to the truth, they ruin you. But you'll still go to the internet and you'll see stories. I just read one the other day, how Phil Kronzer was a fraud. So they put that out there. That's exactly what they do. I remember, here's how they operate even at small levels. I remember years ago when I was doing these shows, I was one of the few people that was really making it a daily affair, doing it every day, getting a lot of listeners, waking up people. And I remember I got attacked by a number of people, Alex Jones included, and then they started putting stuff out on the internet through a number of other people that I was a CIA asset. I was a mind-programmed individual working with the CIA or something. I had a handler. They even made up who that guy was. And so they were discrediting me using their, a number of different websites and things where more people would read that than they saw me. So one day I'm living in a small town in Colorado, and I go into the library, and there was a guy I knew, and I walked by him, and he said, "Oh, hey, are you this guy? Yeah, we've talked before. Look, wow, I didn't know we had a CIA agent in our town. And he was reading Alex Jones. So this is what you're up against. And they do it in every aspect, even in little things like with what I was doing, and then bigger things like Phil Kranzer, and then bigger and bigger things as, people like Alberto Rivera or others who leave the Jesuit order to tell the truth. They're killed. And so it gets to a level of, you got to realize that, you have to learn this stuff because you're going to understand they're taking you and turning everything upside down. So looking at Fatima, we did this years ago. Fatima, according to the, what happened there were, let's see, the timeline of 6 apparitions of Fatima. Let's get this straight. On June 13, 1976, a crowd of 100. No, on May 13th, 1917, no crowd. And there was no post-event reporter only. Then there was another one on June 13th. Another one on June 13th. Then August 19th, 1917. September 13th. October 13th. So we got all these apparitions back then and very few reporting of it, right? So the story moves on. And according to only 1 to 3 persons who saw and heard of her, the lady, who appeared at Fatima, identified herself as Our Lady of the Rosary. Okay? Now, out of the 3 children that supposedly saw the Mother Mary, only 1 apparently did, okay? And you have to really carefully look at this because what happened to those 2 other children is just incredible. Okay, so basically, although there were supposedly 3 children involved in the apparitions, in the apparitions I just mentioned, and those 6 different ones, the beliefs, involved in those apparitions, the beliefs people have about Our Lady of Fatima are based, for the most part, on the testimony of only one witness, and that was 10-year-old Lucia Santos. She became a Catholic nun, right? Now, after the first vision, when her 2 younger, intellectually challenged cousins failed to corroborate her vision of events, Lucia then announced that it was the lady's idea that they only be allowed to see her. In subsequent apparitions, not hear her. And as Lucia explained, Francisco and Jacinta believed in me as if I had absolute authority over them. Yet, when separated from her while being asked by the reporter about discrepancies, we're going back to reports back then. Between their visions of the apparitions, Francisco ended up saying that he hadn't actually seen or heard anything. Millions of Roman Catholics, believers, have been persuaded to make pilgrimages to Fatima and to contribute God only knows how much of their gold and silver to the Fatima cult, largely on the basis of the spectacular miracle of the sun. On October 13th, that was the last one, right? 1917, by which Almighty God supposedly provided confirmation of Our Lady of Fatima appearances for all the world to see. That was the day of the grand finale of the 6 apparitions, when some 70,000 witnesses had gathered at Fatima. I always wonder about the name Fatima. Who is, Fatima is the daughter of Muhammad, right? Any connections there? Including hundreds of reporters, among them correspondents of the London Times, New York Times, the Vatican's own official newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano, and other world press. And God only knows how many other witnesses in Portugal and the rest of the world for whom the sun was visible at the time. Now, go on and read about that stuff. I mean, it's incredible what's going on. What happened to the 2 other children? Well, they're no longer around, not because of age. They both died at a very young age, and there was Francisco Marto at age 8, February 1919, only 2 years after Fatima, supposedly died of mortal dehydration. Now, Jacinto Marto, okay, 7, a year later, died of pleurisy, they say. So these kids that supposedly, within the 4 years of Fatima apparitions, in addition to Francisco and his sister Jacinta, okay, we got Jacinta, Francisco dead, and their strange deaths. 3 other Marto children, now we're not talking about Lucia, also suffered premature and tragic deaths. Florinda Marta, just a month after Jacinta, Joac Marto, a year later, and Teresa Marto, a fatal fall, innocent disappearance of one of the other boy, Joac Marto. And more probably there was foul play in those last 2. The Florinda Marto, they say, was immediate arsenic poisoning, possibly. Jacinta Marto, gradual arsenic poisoning. And Francisco, because they said it was mortal dehydration, they say gradual suicide. Ironically, while the parents who lost all of these children were true believers of everything their niece Lucia said about the lady, her own mother always insisted that Lucia was a liar and a fraud who shouldn't be trusted or believed. Jacinto was then, or Lucia then, read her story. She then was made it, she went into the nunnery, she became a Catholic nun, and boy, I think they probably kept her under lock and key most of the time. So, then they declare before Pope Francis declares Lucia Santos a saint because of visions that she claims she have received from Our Lady of the Rosary, don't you think it would be a good idea for the Roman Catholic Church to do research on a number of different things? On what, we got to get into a story of Lucian Gregor and him in this whole thing. There's just so much in this. I really recommend you read a little bit. If you're a devout Catholic, read all this stuff. I mean, how can you believe this? And then if you're not, this puts more credence to the fact of what I'm talking about. And that from every aspect, whether it be spiritual, they're trying to take over your mind, body, and soul. And I've said it a number of times. And they do really a pretty good job of it. Because not many people will even pay attention to this story because they're too busy following all the nonsense in Washington. And anytime you want to really distract people, get a good actor like Donald Trump in there. And boy, people watch him, the things he says, and then the other side starts saying things, and pretty soon you got a circus in Washington, and everybody listening like it's some kind of soap opera. When in fact what they're doing is, this is the Vatican-led New World Order at work, using the Hegelian dialectic as their tool, pitting the left against the right, pitting countries against countries in war, controlling both sides. And then just for fun, they do all this kind of stuff, these fake apparitions. And remember, neither of those first 2 children died of the flu. Okay? And you know that Lucia told her 2 other kids, the 2 other kids, to torture themselves? Right? On the grounds that is what the lady expected them to do. So you're going to base this whole story and give them money based on these on this stuff? Wow. Anyway, we're going to come back and talk to Phil Kronzer again. I'm going to play my old interview from 2006. And he spent millions of dollars to try to get his wife back, and really exposes the Medjugorje hoax. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app, for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here, and go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you can see the Mother Mary. Yeah, got a vision on there, right? Oh boy, maybe no, she's in a tree. I'm looking out my window. I see her up in the tree. Maybe I should get some people over here and start collecting some money, like the Jesuits do on fake Mother Mary apparitions. How do they live with themselves? I really don't know, because they're Satanists, I guess. But anyway, back before I get to Phil Kranzer and Medjugorje, the Catholic Church has always claimed, without offering any supporting evidence from any medical records, that Francisco and Jacinta both died because of the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918-19. Okay? Now, Jacinta and Francisco were supposedly the first, along with Lucia, were the first 3 little kids to see the Mother Mary. Then they recanted and said they never saw the Mother Mary, and Lucia said that they should torture themselves because the Mother Mary wants them to do that. So basically, my take is they had to get rid of these kids. They not only got rid of those 2 kids, but the rest of the family, they got rid of several other kids from that family for some reason. Florinda, Johak, and Teresa Marto. They died just a year later. Remember? Foul play, immediate arsenic poisoning. This is what the medical records are maybe showing, going back a long way. But let's look a little deeper into this. Because if the Mother Mary apparition is based on this, then if you believe it, something, you shouldn't even, I don't know what's going on in your head. I mean, it's a little screwy if you don't think about these things. And what they'll say? Oh, this is all Catholic propaganda. Well, however, by delving into historical records, of the worldwide pandemic on the one hand, and onto their own personal medical records on the other, Lucian Gregor was able to determine this, a guy who researched it, okay? Neither of the two children died of the flu, okay? That's Jacinta and, what's the other one? Francisco. Both of the children followed the advice of their older cousin Lucia to torture themselves on the grounds, and Lucia was older than these two kids, on the grounds that is what the lady expected of them. 3. Lucia herself didn't follow that path herself. She didn't torture herself, did she? No. She became a Catholic nun, and I think they kept her in hiding. I know the story on her. She took a vow of chastity, and she became a hermit nun or something. So they didn't want her talking, basically. Francisco followed the path so faithfully that it led to his death, gradual suicide. For what reason Jacinta didn't follow that path faithfully enough to die from it? The hospital records and medical records, including burial and exhumation records, provide ample evidence that the real cause of Jacinta's death was gradual arsenic poisoning. Okay? Now, what about those other children? Now, according to Lucia's 1942 memoirs, the lady had told Jacinta in a private appearance, "I'm going to take your sisters Florinda and Teresa too." Look at this bullshit. Because they want to live a life of the flesh and not take a vow of chastity and become nuns. So apparently the Mother Mary told Lucia, I mean, if you're going to believe this garbage, you got problems. You go see a psychiatrist or something, or a psychologist, because you've been mind controlled. Because this is documented. Lucia in 1942 is telling people that the Mother Mary took her cousins, because they were going to lead a life of the flesh and not become nuns and priests. Now, before the 15-year-old Florinda could meet with an investigator, these are the other children, to share her suspicions about the deaths of her younger brother and sister, she dropped dead of what looked like classic case of acute arsenic poisoning, but what was called a cerebral aneurysm, which was little more than an educated guess in those days. Within 2 weeks, that Lucia's bishop had instructed her that she was to move away from Fatima forever, become a nun, and never talk to anyone about these visions again. One of the two remaining Marto children, Johak, had vanished. And when the second, Teresa, went looking for him, she herself was found dead of a broken neck at the bottom of one of the many deep crevices in the area. I think before Pope Francis, I don't know if he did already, declares Lucia Santos a saint, he ought to look into what Lucian Gregor has found out. Don't you think? Was she a saint? Well, you know, the saints are devils in the Catholic Church, really, when you start thinking about who they've canonized a saint. And ask yourself why they've never excommunicated Hitler. I mean, there's so much here. And when you realize that they're in control of a lot of things in your life, through Georgetown University, right next to the White House, even the beginnings of your country, you owe it to yourself to start looking at this. And it's a hell of a lot more important than listening to the Mueller report and all that garbage going on in Washington. I have to say it's a good theater. It's hard to get away from, isn't it? You bet it is. So anyway, ending the story, Pope Francis, just last month, decided to authorize these trips to Medjugorje and say, okay, Catholic dioceses all over the world, it's okay to go spend your money there. We need the money. And they overlook everything. So, but they said, don't worry, we have not yet authorized Medjugorje as a real live Mother Mary apparition. Well, they've already authorized Fatima, and look at this as a fraud of... This is the biggest one of all, maybe, huh? Going back to 1917. So let's find out what happened to the kids at Medjugorje. Yeah? It's always these little children that see them, and these poor kids ended up dead. Back then, you see, if they can kill children, arsenic poisoning, because they want this fraud to go on, man. You think that my stories about satanic worshiping in the Vatican catacombs are a bit overboard? Think about it. And so, with that in mind, why don't we go back to, for the last minutes here, and I can continue next week on this story, because it deserves a little more attention, despite all the craziness going on in Washington. Oh, by the way, let me bring up that Trump is now declaring these tariffs, to be a success, I think, because he's going to put a 5% tariff because he wants Mexico to lend a hand and not allow so many to come across the Guatemalan border into Mexico and then into America. Mexico has now said they're going to send 6,000 troops, National Guard troops. That'll be fun. And do a few other things to make sure that not as many people come storming into America. I think the Trump administration wants something done with these asylum laws so that if they come for asylum, they got to go back to Mexico. And Mexico says, we don't want them here, so get them back to Guatemala, I guess. So we'll see what that's doing. I just wanted to bring that up. So let's get back to Phil Kronzer and talk about, this is going back to 2006 now, about the Medjugorje hoax.
Well, let's get back to your story. You were talking about how this group, the Medjugorje people, moved to Denver, how Nilica and all these people infiltrated this, using this as a fraud. Just before we get back to the particular, what's the point of them doing this from your research? Go ahead.
Well, it's always money, number one. Money and power. Needless, we have a woman by the name of Anna Marie Schmidt. She's quite elderly, but she came from, I'm not sure exactly where she came from in Europe, but I believe Germany or somewhere in there. But see, she knew Neelitsa from before, and through a very good friend of mine, a very good nun, Sister Philip Marie Burley, Anna Marie Schmidt identified Neelitsa as a KGB operative from years ago. Mm-hmm. And again, it was all money. They had the $200 million business plan set up in Denver, and they had this big visionary, Teresa Lopez, who was all set up, and they would ended up going to the Mother Cabrini Shrine, which is up near Golden, Colorado, and there's a retreat center up there, and they were drawing crowds as many as 10,000 people on a weekend. So they were rolling in the money.
Rolling in the money on this.
Exactly. Then Teresa Lopez ended up, she came to San Francisco, South San Francisco, I believe it was about June of 1993, and my wife and I were still together, and everything was fine. And we went to that conference, and I was there when Lopez was up speaking, and without a script for an hour, she went on and on, and I even believed her. I mean, I literally, she was more mesmerizing. Mm-hmm. And we even had a video of it that we brought home, and wanted to show it to our children. I've got 3 grown children. All of our children are in their 40s. Now they don't talk to me because I've been declared insane. That's why they do it to you. Okay. Anyway, we got into that in June, and then my wife went on this retreat that I was talking about. This was in November of 1983, and she went with this woman, Marcia Smith, and I wasn't invited. And they were at Snow Mountain Ranch in the hills, the mountains above Denver. And she came back, and I didn't know her. I mean, her eyes looked funny, and she was acting very strange, and she started picking fights. Then they had another retreat in California in January of 1994, and Neelitsa came out with another one of his phony priests, a guy by the name of Paul Sigel, and they had this weekend retreat, and I got the video of that, and I mean, it was nothing but mind control. People, they were literally chanting the rosaries. You could see what was going on. And then in May of 94, they took my wife Artie to Notre Dame for another a conference and a special retreat, and I wasn't invited. She was gone for about 6 days. And we have a video of that where Artie is on stage with this Marcia Smith woman, and they're giving testimony on behalf of Bishop Pavel Neelitsa, and Neelitsa was supposed to be, they were introducing him as the spiritual leader of the entire Medjugorje movement, all across the United States.
And this was at the Notre Dame conference?
Notre Dame conference.
You finally got into that then?
Yeah, they finally got in. Once they got these guys ordained, they got some credibility, and they worked their way in. Then there was a Sister Emmanuel Millard, who was also in Medjugorje. She had was involved with a group of nuns called the Beatitudes. Now, that's an order that Bishop Ratko Peric and most are banned from Medjugorje, but he can't get them to leave because they just don't listen to what he says. I met Bishop Peric back in 1998. He was a very good man. So here we had this Lopez thing, and we had the video of my wife up on stage, Marcia Smith, who wrote the script, and my wife, you could see that she was under total mind control. There's no question about it. And at the end of that, they raise their rosaries and say, to the triumph, okay? And then they kneel down, and Bishop Neelitzer prays over them. So I showed that video to my children about a year after the fact, and they went ballistic. But eventually they got my children to turn against me, and they believe their mother. It's what they can do with mind control on this stuff, Greg, is absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Now, what eventually happened to your wife?
Well, I say she literally disappeared on June 30th. I came back from Carmel. I was in a golf outing with my son-in-law and my son and a customer, and I came back and I came home to empty closets, and we couldn't find her for 3 months.
And when you did find her, what happened?
Well, what happened is this Marcia Smith woman had literally leased a condominium for her, set everything up under her own maiden name, and set everything up, and she had her tucked away and hidden. We had zero contact with her for the first 3 months, and my daughter Cindy and my son Mike were going crazy over the whole situation. I mean, they thought I was going to commit suicide. I mean, I was devastated. 39-year marriage, and it's just thing out of the blue, she's gone. And we all knew that she was acting kind of strange for several months before that, but we just couldn't put our finger on it.
Right.
But she was under total mind control.
So then she leaves. The children and you are aligned together.
Right, two of them, and my son Doug was estranged at the time from his brother and sister anyway, so he was kind of odd man out. But Cindy and Mike, we got into this thing together to figure out. They finally, at the end of September, found her up at Marcia Smith's house, went up to see her, and tried to get her to leave. And after about 20 minutes, Marcia Smith just literally put her into her vehicle, her Jeep, and drove off. She wasn't about to leave. She couldn't focus her eyes. She had lost about 15 pounds, and believe me, she didn't have 15 pounds to lose. So we were beside ourselves. So eventually, she did come out and meet with my children. But prior to that, she hired a female divorce attorney from Palo Alto, California, by the name of Cheryl Cassidy. We find out now that Cheryl Cassidy is a card-carrying member of Call to Action, and she wants to be ordained a priest. They call her Ms. Catholic. Mm-hmm. They also call her the liquidator. She's got a reputation for breaking up assets and disposing of everything. To see what they're doing, there's no question what's going on out here in this Silicon Valley atmosphere. They're literally breaking up marriages, and the real estate brokers and the divorce attorneys are laughing all the way to the bank. It's a racket.
I see. So they're breaking up your marriage, and they get your assets, correct?
Exactly. I lost $5 million just on 2 houses because they were sold by court order. And in September of 1994, Artie's attorney told my accountant, because I didn't even hire an attorney at the time, he told my accountant, well, besides the money that Mr. Kronzer is paying her every month, which we paid her immediately, there was no argument about it.
Well, there's no way to repair this marriage then?
Well, there wasn't even a talk of counseling or reconciliation of any kind. We didn't even have access to her.
And you see, to me, let's say you're looking now, you're trying to mount a defense. I mean, they're going to just say, hey, this is a scorned man. His wife had problems, and look at what's he talking about.
I have a 30-year restraining order against me right now. Now, very early on, within the first 6 months, my 2 children, Cindy and Mike, I got in touch with Cult Awareness in Chicago at the time. They were still in business before Scientology put them out of business. And I got in touch with them, and they were very helpful. They connected me with people who gave me information about what was going on. I flew to Philadelphia with documents what I had. I had very little at the time. And I went to Philadelphia and had a meeting with a guy by the name of Dave Clark in a hotel. We spent about 3 hours together. I told him what I had, and he said, There's no question your wife's under my control. She's in a cult. Dave Clark is one of the best exit counselors that ever came along. He's taken them out of the Moonies and everywhere.
Yeah, now, where's your wife as we speak today?
She lives in Foster City with the same woman, Marcia Smith.
And you said now earlier you made mention that they consider, you're considered crazy, and
yep.
that your other children now have turned against you. How's that?
Well, it took a little time. What happened is, let me back up a little.
Okay.
In September of '94, Artie's attorney said, by the way, we'd like $100,000 in cash. And I told my accountant, I said, well, tell them so would I, because I was still running businesses and we had lines of credit, and I wasn't about to borrow money to give them the $100,000 cash. So what happened is they took Artie to Rome and to the Holy Land with Bishop Nielitsa and about 20 people, and she was supposed to pay for the whole bill. And I found out from a priest later on in Denver that, yes, Bishop Nielitsa had asked her for $80,000, and that's what the $100,000 was for. Well, when I said no, that's when they took off the gloves, and that's when the fireworks started. Then about a year later, in May of '95, my two children, Cindy and Mike, were getting fed up with the cat and mouse game that was being played. They couldn't see their mother. So 2 weeks from Tuesday, I can see for lunch at 2 in the afternoon, that type of arrangements. And then she always had her cell phone with her, because they were watching her like a hawk, figuring that, and in fact, the truth is we did have people working with us in Cult Awareness Network. We were going to do a family intervention. We had one shot at it where we rented a couple of cabins up in the mountains near Lake Tahoe by Truckee, and got her to, she was agreed to go. We had it all set up. The kids convinced her to go, and I had the 2D programmers coming out from Baltimore, and we were praying for a blizzard, and by golly, at the last minute, she came up with laryngitis, and we had a leak. Somebody found out about it. That's why we couldn't get her to come. We'd have had her out at that time.
Right. Now, what kind of mind control programs have they used on her that you're aware of?
Well, we have information that they're using electronic devices in Medjugorje and holograms, okay? We trying to pin this down and prove it is very difficult, but we've gotten enough information from different sources that they do use this electronic mind control thing, and the Russians developed this stuff a long time ago, and it has been used, and holograms to make people think that they're seeing visions. You see, Father Malachi Martin, you've heard the name?
Oh, of course, sure.
Okay, well, see, I never met Father Malachi Martin, but we gave him a video that was called Visions on Demand, which was the first video that these people in England made, and I got involved with them later. And Michael Jones was on that video about Medjugorje, and we sent it to Father Malachi Martin, and he sent us a postcard back saying, thank you and congratulations for exposing the hoax of Medjugorje. I declared it satanic from the beginning. And he gave us permission to use that quote, and we did. And boy, when we did, we were threatened with lawsuits from several different sources. So there's something about Medjugorje that's much bigger that I don't even know about yet. It's just, there's something huge there.
Mm-hmm.
And, first of all, there's a ton of money involved. The Franciscans were involved in their own bank. But back to this Lopez thing, in May of '94 at Notre Dame, Bishop Nielitsa celebrated Mass with Tomislav Pervan, who was at the time the provincial of the Franciscans of the Mostar province, which controlled Medjugorje. Now, these people will deny that they had a relationship, but Nielitsa was in and out of Medjugorje regularly since we know for sure around 1984. 1984, before my wife and I even went there. And of course, you remember the murder of Roberto Calvi.
Of course.
Okay,
yeah.
Calvi was hung under the bridge in '82, Blackfriars Bridge.
Yeah, now, just for our listeners, Roberto Calvi was the head of Bank of Ambrosiano, who took a dive when the Vatican was involved with the Vatican bank scandal. Millions and billions of dollars were laundered and stolen. Calvi had information, and many of the people involved in this scandal thought he was going to blow the whistle on him, so he was found dead. And that trial is now finally going on, started a year ago in Rome. Go ahead.
But yes, and then also connected with the Calvi case, Bielitsa was running around with a briefcase, with about $3 million cash in it, trying to buy Kelly's briefcase because it had contained all the information with the Swiss bank accounts, and that's how he got involved with that situation. I still don't know what the real connection in Medjugorje was with that, but we know that Bielitsa was closely related to a guy by the name of Lena, who was a heavy-duty drug dealer, and another guy by the name of Jelly.
Jelly. He was the head of P2 Masonic Lodge.
Right. He was involved with all those characters.
Yeah, and Jelly was also connected to the Reagan administration in many different ways. So anyway, this thing goes deep and down and dirty. So let's go Nilika. Here's this name coming up. Many may think a benign Jesuit priest. What else have you found out about him this last minute? Then we'll get back to your story and more.
Then later on in the investigation, let's get away from my family situation here. But by 1997, early '97, we did a complete expose on Teresa Lopez. I found her last fifth husband, Jeff, in Reno, Nevada, and I went up to see him, and he gave me all kinds of documentation. That's when I got involved with E. Michael Jones, and I furnished him with the information, and then Jones and I started working together on his book called The Medjugorje Deception, which he wrote. And my story is in there. Everything that happened to me is in that book, and a lot more. So then in late '97, the same people in Liverpool, England, who had done the first video called Visions on Demand against Medjugorje with E. Michael Jones, got in touch with me, and they wanted me to work with them. And I went to Liverpool in November of '97.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.